Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and realized they were hiding a universe? One made not of secrets, but of carefully constructed illusions. Most people see what they wish to see in a woman: strength, beauty, serenity. But beneath that poise, there are 10 shadows that she will never let you glimpse. 10 quiet weaknesses that are not born of fragility, but of depth. A woman's first weakness is her silence. Not because she has nothing to say, but because silence is her shield, her instrument of power. It is there she observes, measures, and masters the unseen. You think she is quiet because she is unsure. No. She is quiet because she already knows. The second is compassion. It looks soft, doesn't it? Yet compassion is the sharpest blade. She feels for others, and in that feeling she often bleeds. Yet from that very wound she creates empathy, the one force that no tyranny, no intellect can defeat. The third is her desire to be understood. This is the most human of all weaknesses. She hides it, fearing that to reveal it is to surrender her mystery. But in truth, this yearning is what makes her soul luminous. It drives her toward creation, connection, transcendence. The fourth is attachment. She attaches not because she is weak, but because she is capable of deep loyalty. Yet when betrayed, that same depth becomes her torment. Her love, once infinite, turns to distance colder than stone. The fifth is fear of losing control. She often crafts perfection around her life, a delicate web of order. But beneath it lies chaos, beautiful, wild, and alive. The irony is that her true power emerges only when she surrenders control and allows that chaos to breathe. The sixth weakness is pride. She will never admit she's hurt. She'd rather burn silently than let the world see her break. This is not arrogance. It is the mask she wears to protect her sacred wounds. The seventh is nostalgia. A woman lives partly in memories. She feels the weight of every what-if. Her heart, unlike a man's, rarely forgets. The past for her is not gone. It is a garden she still tends in secret. The eighth is trust. Once given, it's absolute. Once broken, it's gone forever. She hides this weakness beneath tests, suspicions, and emotional mazes. But understand, these are not games. They are fortifications built to protect her soul. The ninth is her beauty. Not the beauty you see, but the beauty she doubts. Every compliment touches her like a wave that retreats too quickly. Her image in the mirror is a battlefield between how she feels and how the world demands she appear. And the 10th is love itself, the greatest and most perilous weakness. For when she loves, she dissolves every boundary between self and other. She becomes mirror, fire, healer, storm. And in that surrender, she risks losing herself entirely. But here lies the paradox. These are not weaknesses at all. They are the sacred paradoxes that make her whole. They are the shadows from which her light is born. What men call weakness, the wise recognize as the unconscious power of creation itself. The woman's secret, then, is not that she hides her weaknesses, it is that she has learned to weave them into her strength. And the moment you think you've understood her, you will realize you've only just entered the first chamber of her soul. Have you ever stood before silence so thick, so deliberate, that it made you question whether you were truly seeing the person before you, or merely the reflection of your own expectations? That is the first and perhaps the most misunderstood weakness a woman hides, her silence. Yet to call it a weakness is, in itself, a misunderstanding of human nature. What appears as silence in her is rarely absence. It is presence. It is not emptiness, but the containment of thought, emotion, and instinct too complex to be spoken hastily. Silence for her is not submission. It is her first act of control. In the modern psyche, we often equate speech with strength. Those who speak loudly seem powerful. Those who hold their tongue seem uncertain. But the feminine silence operates on an entirely different plane. It is not a lack of voice. It is the testing of energy, the gathering of psychic material before it takes form. In that pause between what she feels and what she says lies the very essence of her power, restraint. The woman who remains silent is not idle, she is perceiving. Her intuition, the unseen radar of her consciousness, is mapping the emotional landscape of every encounter. She listens not only to words, but to tone, rhythm, contradiction. She studies not only the other's face, but their pauses, their hesitations, their unconscious betrayals. Her silence is not ignorance, it is observation sharpened into weaponry. There is something deeply erotic in this silence too. In relationships, her quietness draws desire like a gravitational pull. The unspoken, the unsaid, the half-revealed. It is within this mystery that attraction ferments. Men often mistake this mystery for manipulation, when in truth it is simply the natural magnetism of the hidden. What remains unspoken retains power. What is confessed too soon loses it. Psychologically, this dynamic touches the deepest roots of human interaction. The masculine principle, active and outward, seeks to conquer uncertainty through speech, through naming. The feminine principle, inward and receptive, sustains uncertainty, allowing ambiguity to mature into understanding. Thus her silence is not just personal, it is archetypal. It carries the ancient wisdom of nature itself, which creates in stillness, not in noise. The seed germinates underground before it blooms. The tide withdraws before it returns. Yet there is a darker side to this gift. Silence, when misunderstood or misused, can become isolation. A woman who hides too deeply in her quiet may imprison herself within her own psyche. Her unspoken emotions, her fears, her longings, her rage, begin to echo back upon her, amplifying themselves in the darkness. What began as self-protection becomes self-confinement. She risks mistaking stillness for safety, when in truth unexpressed feeling is like stagnant water. It eventually poisons the soul. This is why silence is both her strength and her weakness. It shields her, yes, but it also separates her from intimacy. In silence she observes truth, yet she can also conceal it. How many times has she known the answer, seen the betrayal, felt the love unspoken, but chosen to remain silent because speaking it would expose too much of herself? That is the paradox. Her silence is born of wisdom, but also of fear. On a deeper sexual level, silence becomes the language of instinct. Desire, especially feminine desire, does not easily lend itself to words. The most profound erotic experiences are not narrated. They are felt, absorbed, and remembered in the body. The woman's silence here is not withholding. It is sacred. It protects the mystery of her own longing, refusing to let it be reduced to the crude logic of explanation. There is a sanctity in that reserve. Philosophically, we might say her silence mirrors the unconscious itself, the great dark ocean beneath the visible mind. In Jungian terms, this is the realm of the anima, the living symbol of the feminine within every psyche, male or female. Silence, in this sense, is not passive. It is creative. It is the pregnant void from which meaning, emotion, and transformation emerge. To dwell in silence is to dwell close to the source, and this is why those who misunderstand her silence often feel discomfort before it. God confronts them with their own emptiness, their own inability to bear the weight of unspoken truth. A man may project onto her silence whatever his ego fears, rejection, judgment, indifference, but her silence may contain none of these, only the slow alchemy of reflection. What he calls distant may simply be depth he has not yet learned to fathom. To understand a woman's silence, one must learn to listen differently, to hear not the absence of sound, but the presence of meaning. Silence is her first language, her most ancient expression. In it, she conceals her wounds and her wisdom, her questions and her power. She hides not because she is weak, but because the sacred cannot be spoken cheaply. If you truly wish to know her, do not force her to speak. Sit with her silence. Let it unfold around you. Let it test your patience, your courage, your willingness to exist in uncertainty. For the one who can listen into silence, not merely to it, will discover that behind her quiet lies an entire cosmos waiting to be seen. Remember this. Her silence is not your rejection. It is your invitation. An invitation to look beyond words, beyond surface, beyond the noise of the world, and to meet the profound mystery that dwells at the core of all creation. Those who rush to fill the silence with chatter will never know her. But those who can stand within that stillness without fear, those are the ones who will see her truth. Compassion, a word so often whispered with reverence, yet so little understood in its full raw depth. If silence is a woman's unseen armor, then compassion is her open wound, glorious, luminous, and perilous all at once. Most mistake it for gentleness, for softness, but in truth, compassion is one of the most dangerous and demanding forces in human psychology. It is the gateway through which both her strength and her suffering flow. When a woman feels compassion, she does not merely sympathize, she merges. Her psyche, by nature, dissolves boundaries more easily than the masculine mind. She feels the pain of others not as an observer, but as a participant. This is her gift and her curse, because to feel deeply is to bleed continuously, even in silence. Her heart, when open, becomes a vessel for the world's ache. And in that vastness, she often forgets where her own sorrow ends and another's begins. From a psychological perspective, compassion is not just an emotion, it is a psychic bridge. In Jungian terms, it represents the anima's capacity for union, for wholeness. The feminine consciousness carries within it the instinct to reconcile opposites, to forgive what wounds it, to heal what destroys it, to love what terrifies it. She does not simply want peace, she wants transformation, and that desire to mend, to redeem, is what makes her both divine and vulnerable. There is a profound eroticism in this, though not always in the physical sense. Compassion is the psychic equivalent of intimacy. It demands surrender. When a woman feels compassion, she opens herself to another's chaos. She allows that energy to move through her body, through her emotions, through her spirit. This is why a woman's love, once given, carries a power that frightens men. It is not selective, it is total. She cannot half love, half heal, or half give. She must either remain distant or become consumed. And yet this same compassion can destroy her if she has not yet learned the art of discernment. She can mistake empathy for obligation, kindness for identity. She nurtures what hurts her, defends what betrays her, and justifies what depletes her. Because in her psyche, love and endurance are intertwined. Her compassion becomes her prison. The very energy that was meant to create healing becomes the chain that binds her to suffering. This psychological loop is ancient, rooted in the archetype of the Great Mother, the eternal nurturer who gives endlessly and dies from her own generosity. Every woman carries a shadow of this archetype within her. When she over-identifies with it, she sacrifices her own growth for the comfort of others. She becomes a vessel that never refills. Her compassion, once sacred, becomes servitude. But when she awakens, when she sees that compassion without boundaries is self-erasure, something miraculous happens. Her empathy evolves from sentiment into wisdom. She learns that love must have structure, that mercy without discernment is not virtue but vanity. True compassion, she realizes, does not mean absorbing another's pain. It means illuminating it. It does not mean saving others from their darkness, but standing beside them as they confront it. In relationships, this evolution marks a profound turning point. Early in love, her compassion may drive her to rescue, to soothe, to fix, to heal. But later, as her awareness deepens, she discovers that the highest form of love is not rescue but respect. It is the recognition that every soul must face its own crucible. She learns to hold space, not to fill it. She learns to love without losing herself. There is also a sexual dimension here, subtle yet immense. A woman's compassion often expresses itself through her body, the way she touches, listens, breathes. Her tenderness is not weakness, but an invitation into vulnerability. She awakens the other's hidden self by making him feel seen, forgiven, accepted. This is why men often confuse compassion with desire. They experience in her presence something they rarely feel elsewhere, permission to be human. But this gift, if exploited, burns her from within. When her compassion becomes performance rather than truth, her sensuality dulls, her vitality fades. The body knows when love is being drained instead of shared. Philosophically, compassion reveals the paradox of human strength. To be compassionate is to acknowledge interdependence, that no soul is isolated, no suffering is separate. Yet to practice it wisely is to maintain one's own center while extending warmth outward. This balance between self and other is the essence of maturity. It is where the soul stops confusing martyrdom with love. The world often praises compassion, but it rarely honors the price it exacts. The woman who feels deeply is asked to remain kind even when she is exhausted, to forgive when she is broken, to nurture even when she is starving for care. Society loves her light but fears her depth. It celebrates her empathy while quietly exploiting it. And so she learns to hide it, to ration it, to wield it as deliberately as a sword rather than wear it as a chain. In her silence, she once observed. In her compassion, she once surrendered. But now she learns to do both from a place of sovereignty. She understands that love is not infinite. It must be guarded, cultivated, and offered with intention. True compassion is not an emotional flood. It is a river guided by wisdom, and so the woman who once felt too much begins to feel rightly. Her compassion no longer weakens her, it crowns her. She becomes capable of love that heals without wounding, empathy that empowers rather than depletes. She stands not as a martyr of emotion, but as a master of it, because in the end, compassion is not about saving others. It is about remembering that every act of genuine care, whether for another or for oneself, is an act of creation. It is the invisible force that rebuilds the world quietly, through every small act of understanding. So remember this, her compassion is not softness, it is strength, wearing the face of tenderness. And those who mistake it for weakness will never understand how much power it takes. To love the world and still not let it destroy you, there is a strange tension that lives within every woman, the need to be understood, and the simultaneous fear of being fully seen. It is one of her deepest and most complex weaknesses, though perhaps it would be more truthful to call it a paradox. Because to be understood means to be exposed, and exposure is both liberation and danger. The psyche longs for connection, yet trembles before it. In that trembling lies the dance of the feminine soul, a psychological rhythm of revelation and retreat. The desire to be understood is not vanity. It is spiritual hunger. Every human being wants to be mirrored, to have their inner world recognized as real by another consciousness. But for a woman, this longing carries a particular intensity, a subtle ache shaped by centuries of being misread, projected upon, idealized, or diminished. She has inherited not only her own longing, but the collective longing of generations of silenced women who were seen only as symbols, mothers, lovers, muses, but rarely as selves. Beneath her calm exterior, this inheritance burns. It is not just that she wants to be known. She wants to exist in truth, to have her complexity accepted rather than simplified. Psychologically, this longing is an echo of the anima's need for union with the animus, the eternal dance between the inner feminine and the inner masculine. She does not seek to be understood by intellect alone, but by presence, by emotional attunement. She yearns for the kind of understanding that transcends words, the kind that feels like recognition rather than analysis. And when she finds even a glimpse of it, she opens like dawn. Her defenses soften. Her silence transforms into language. Her compassion becomes invitation. But when this need is met with misunderstanding or indifference, she retreats not out of pride, but out of psychic self-preservation. In love, this dynamic becomes especially charged. When a woman feels unseen by the one she loves, something primal in her soul begins to starve. She might continue to smile, to function, to give, but inwardly she begins to fade. The relationship may survive in form but not in spirit. For her, love without understanding is not love. It is a transaction of roles. And yet, she often cannot voice this hunger directly. To ask to be understood feels too vulnerable, too close to begging for acknowledgement. So she hides her need behind irony, patience, or withdrawal, hoping that someone will see through the mask. There is a sensual dimension to this longing as well, one that few dare to name. To be understood on a deep emotional level awakens in her the same energy that fuels erotic desire. It is not simply about being desired for her body, but being recognized in her totality. Mind, instinct, imagination, vulnerability. When she feels truly seen, her body responds not because of lust, but because understanding is the ultimate intimacy. It dissolves the boundaries between soul and flesh. The erotic for her is inseparable from the psychological. Desire is not just physical, it is existential. Yet this is where her weakness hides. The yearning to be understood can become an addiction. She can begin to shape herself around the gaze of others, molding her identity in ways that please or attract, rather than ways that are authentic. She learns to speak in languages that the world rewards, and forgets her own. In her search for connection, she risks abandoning her inner voice. It is the tragedy of the empath. She senses what others want so clearly that she forgets what she needs. Philosophically, this speaks to a fundamental tension within the human condition, the balance between individuality and communion. To be fully oneself, and yet deeply connected, is the highest form of psychological maturity. But it requires courage, the courage to risk rejection, to reveal one's truth without demanding validation. The woman who reaches this state has mastered her desire to be understood. She no longer begs to be known. She simply is. Her presence becomes its own statement, her authenticity its own magnetism. This evolution marks the transformation of weakness into wisdom. Where once she sought mirrors, she now becomes one. She learns that understanding begins with self-understanding, that no one can perceive her clearly if she remains a mystery to herself. In Jungian terms, this is individuation, the process by which the unconscious becomes conscious, by which the fragmented self becomes whole. Through the pain of being misunderstood, she discovers the necessity of inner dialogue. She becomes her own witness, her own interpreter. When she reaches this level of consciousness, her relationships change entirely. She no longer seeks validation through being known. She seeks resonance through shared awareness. She can love without collapsing, give without losing, speak without needing agreement. And, paradoxically, it is precisely in this freedom that she finally becomes truly understood, because she no longer hides, and she no longer fears. In the sexual realm, too, her energy transforms. No longer does she seek to be seen through the admiring eyes of another. Her sensuality becomes a form of self-expression rather than self-approval. The body, once a site of longing for recognition, becomes a temple of presence. She moves from wanting to be desired to embodying desire itself. The power dynamic shifts completely. She becomes the source, not the object of understanding. But this awakening comes only through the deep pain of having been unseen. There is no shortcut. The woman who has never been misunderstood has never truly met herself. Every dismissal, every misreading, every emotional exile becomes a catalyst for consciousness. Through them she learns the most important truth of all, that being understood is a gift, not a requirement. And when she accepts this truth, her longing no longer enslaves her. It guides her. She begins to draw toward her those who see with the eyes of the soul, who listen with more than ears. Her presence refines her circle. Her silence filters the shallow from the sincere. She becomes magnetic, not because she is mysterious, but because she is real. So understand this. Her desire to be understood is not a plea. It is a path. It leads her from dependence to depth, from longing to liberation. And the moment she stops begging to be seen, she becomes luminous, because the truth is simple. Though few dare to live it, to be truly understood, one must first have the courage to understand oneself. Attachment. It is the invisible thread that weaves a woman's heart into the fabric of her world, the delicate tension between devotion and dependence, love and loss. If silence is her shield, compassion her open wound, and the longing to be understood her mirror, then attachment is the chain she both forges and fears. It is one of her most profound weaknesses, not because it is frail, but because it is powerful beyond measure. To attach is to invest one's very soul in another, to extend the boundaries of the self until the distinction between me and you begins to dissolve. In the psyche, attachment is a double-edged instinct. It is what makes connection possible, what allows love to become real, enduring, transformative. Yet it is also what makes love dangerous, for in every act of attachment, there is the shadow of loss. The deeper the bond, the greater the risk. The woman feels this instinctively. Her emotional nature, biologically and spiritually, is oriented toward relationship. She is not weaker for this. It is the essence of her creative power. But because she bonds so completely, she also suffers more completely. When a woman attaches, she does not merely connect. She merges, she entwines her identity with the person, the idea, the relationship. Her empathy becomes a living thread that ties her to another's moods, needs, and expectations. This depth of connection can be transcendent. It gives rise to devotion, loyalty, the tenderness that makes love sacred. Yet when the balance tilts, when she attaches without grounding, her inner life becomes consumed by the other. She begins to orbit around someone else's gravity, mistaking dependency for intimacy. From a Jungian lens, this tendency can be seen as an encounter with the archetype of Eros, the principle of psychic relatedness. The feminine consciousness by nature seeks unity rather than separation. She experiences love not as possession, but as participation. To her, love is not something she has. It is something she is. But therein lies the danger. When love becomes identity, loss becomes annihilation. She risks dissolving the boundaries of her own being in her quest to maintain connection. In romantic love, this pattern is often erotic and tragic all at once. The woman gives herself completely, body and soul, believing that through total union she will find permanence. Yet love by its very nature is impermanent. It evolves, fades, reforms. When the object of her attachment withdraws, through betrayal, indifference, or time, she feels not only heartbreak, but existential collapse. The withdrawal of love feels like the withdrawal of life itself. This is why so many women, though capable of immense strength, hide a deep fear beneath their calm, the fear of abandonment. It is not simply the fear of being alone, it is the terror of disintegration. When she loves, she extends her consciousness outward. When love is lost, she must call it back piece by piece. The process is painful, because it is an undoing of the self she built in relation to another. Yet this suffering is also a path toward individuation. Every attachment that breaks forces her to reclaim what she once projected onto someone else. She retrieves her own lost energy, her own authority, her own wholeness. What she once sought in another, she learns to cultivate within. Philosophically, this is the evolution from eros to logos, from the emotional to the conscious, from fusion to freedom. She begins to understand that true connection does not require possession. It requires presence. Sexually, attachment carries a profound symbolism. In the act of physical union, the woman often experiences a merging of identities, a sacred erasure of boundaries that mirrors her deepest psychological instinct. But the mistake arises when she confuses this momentary merging with permanent unity. The sexual bond, intense as it is, cannot sustain the illusion of oneness forever. When the physical connection fades, she must confront the emptiness that follows, the realization that love cannot save her from herself, and yet this is where her power lies. Through the pain of detachment, she learns that love was never meant to complete her. It was meant to reveal her. Every attachment becomes a mirror, showing her what parts of herself she has given away, what inner wounds still seek validation. Through loss, she gains vision. Through letting go, she rediscovers her center. There is a quiet dignity in the woman who has passed through this fire. She no longer clings. She connects. She no longer begs. She chooses. Her attachment transforms from dependency into devotion, a conscious act rather than an unconscious reflex. She loves with open eyes, knowing that every bond is temporary, and that its beauty lies precisely in its impermanence. On a philosophical level, this acceptance of impermanence is a form of enlightenment. To love without clinging, to attach without possession, to give without losing oneself, this is mastery. It is not the absence of emotion, but the presence of awareness. She realizes that attachment, when purified by consciousness, becomes something higher than need. It becomes reverence. In this awakened state, she does not fear loss, because she no longer mistakes connection for completion. She understands that what she gives is not diminished when it is not returned. Her love becomes a creative force rather than a consuming one. She moves through life not as someone seeking to be held, but as someone who holds herself. This transformation does not make her colder. It makes her freer. For the first time, her love is not a surrender of power, but the expression of it. She loves not because she must, but because she chooses to. Her attachment becomes art, intentional, ephemeral, beautiful, precisely because it cannot be owned. And so, the very instinct that once bound her becomes the key to her liberation. The chain that once tethered her to others now grounds her within herself. She no longer loves from emptiness, but from abundance. She no longer attaches out of fear, but out of faith. Remember this: attachment, when unconscious, imprisons. When conscious, it sanctifies. To love deeply is human. To love freely is divine. There is a quiet battle that many women fight in secret, the struggle between the need for control and the fear of what might happen without it. It is not a shallow desire for dominance, but a deep psychological defense against chaos. To the outside world, she appears composed, organized, deliberate, her life a tapestry of structure and precision. But beneath that calm, a storm brews. The woman's fear of losing control is not simply about order. It is about survival. Control is her way of keeping the unknown, especially the emotional unknown, at a safe distance. Psychologically, this fear arises from her relationship with the unconscious. The feminine psyche, deeply intuitive and receptive, is intimately connected to the unseen world of feeling, instinct, and intuition. Yet that same connection terrifies her, because the unconscious is vast, unpredictable and uncontrollable. It whispers truths she is not ready to face, desires she has suppressed, anger she has denied, longing she has forbidden. To maintain her sense of self, she builds barriers of discipline, politeness, and perfection. Every carefully crafted routine, every calculated choice, becomes a shield against her own inner chaos. This tension reveals a profound paradox. The same woman who nurtures others, who thrives on intimacy and emotion, often fears her own depth. Her need to maintain control becomes a way of managing vulnerability. She cannot allow herself to fully surrender, to passion, to love, to uncertainty, because surrender feels like death to the ego. To lose control is to risk being consumed by her own feelings, her own intensity, and yet it is in that surrender that her truest self waits. In relationships, this manifests in subtle, complex ways. She may love deeply, but keep a part of herself unreachable. She may crave spontaneity, yet cling to routine. She may yearn to let go in passion, yet tighten when she feels the edge of surrender. Her mind seeks safety. Her body seeks freedom. This inner conflict is not weakness. It is the eternal tension between the conscious and the unconscious, between control and instinct. On a sexual level, this struggle becomes one of the most profound symbols of the human condition. In intimacy, losing control can be transcendent. It is the moment when ego dissolves and two beings merge beyond language. For the woman who fears this loss, however, passion becomes a negotiation between surrender and self-protection. Her arousal may awaken the very chaos she has worked so hard to contain, the irrational, the wild, the instinctual. To her, this can feel dangerous because it exposes the raw truth of her nature, that beneath the polished composure lies a force that cannot be domesticated. Philosophically, this tension is the story of life itself. Nature, like the feminine psyche, is built on cycles of creation and destruction, order and disorder. The tide must withdraw to return. The seed must break open to grow. To resist this rhythm is to resist life. But society, built on masculine ideals of control, has taught her to fear her own nature, to equate surrender with weakness, to see chaos as failure. So she internalizes that lesson, learning to suppress her instinct in the name of dignity. She mistakes repression for strength and ends up divided from herself. Yet when she begins to understand the deeper pattern, a remarkable transformation occurs. She realizes that the loss of control she fears is not destruction, it is renewal. The unconscious is not her enemy but her ally. When she allows her emotions to rise without judgment, her intuition sharpens. When she lets her desires speak without shame, her energy returns. When she releases her need to manage everything, life itself begins to guide her. This is not about abandoning responsibility, but about trusting the organic intelligence of her psyche. True control, she discovers, is not about holding everything together. It is about aligning with the deeper order that emerges when she stops resisting. This is the wisdom of the feminine, to move with the currents of life rather than against them. In this realization, she experiences a kind of awakening. Her perfectionism softens into authenticity. Her rigidity melts into rhythm. What once looked like discipline born of fear transforms into discernment born of trust. She becomes fluid without being formless, strong without being hard. In her relationships, she no longer manipulates to feel secure. She communicates. She no longer performs strength. She embodies it. From a Jungian perspective, this is the reconciliation of the ego with the self, the moment when consciousness stops fighting the unconscious and begins to cooperate with it. Her fear of losing control dissolves because she has learned to trust the intelligence of her inner world. She sees that chaos was never meant to destroy her. It was meant to awaken her. The irony is profound. The woman who tries to control everything eventually exhausts herself, while the woman who learns to let go discovers real power. Control belongs to the surface. Freedom belongs to the depths. The moment she releases her grip, her energy returns, her creativity flourishes, and her intuition becomes her compass. To the outside world, it may look as though she has changed little. She still leads, still cares, still acts with purpose. But internally, the difference is immense. She no longer clings to certainty as if it were salvation. She allows life to surprise her. She no longer fears her wildness. She honors it. Her strength is no longer an armor but a current, alive, flexible, unbreakable. And this is where the paradox completes itself. By surrendering control, she gains mastery. The woman who once feared the chaos within now understands that her power does not lie in suppressing it, but in dancing with it. So remember this, what she feared losing was never control, it was the illusion of it. The real strength lies in the courage to let go, to trust the unfolding of life, to allow both passion and peace to coexist, because only when she surrenders does she finally become whole.